Well, hello. This is Dr. LaWanda N. Evans, licensed professional counselor, healthy relationship expert. I'm coming to you today with the truth about your relationship in recognition of Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So tonight's topic is choosing to stay is not always a choice when domestic violence hits home. So tonight I'm going to do a lot of teaching. I'm going to talk about domestic violence, what it is, what it looks like, the signs, different types of abuse. I'm going to talk about why people stay. So tonight's topic is all things domestic violence. If you know anyone who may be interested in this topic, you know anyone who may be struggling in this area, please feel free to invite them to join in on tonight's segment, although it will be posted on my page as well. So tonight I'm going to go a little bit slow so that I can really give you all the information that I have, all the research that I've done. And I'm also going to give some resources at the end to help people, to give people numbers so that you can have information to actually reach out if you know of anyone or if you yourself is struggling in this particular area. So when it comes to domestic violence, domestic violence doesn't have a face. Many times people think that that domestic violence hits different types of people, or they hit certain people, or certain people are actually involved in domestic violence. And I like to tell people that when it comes to domestic violence, there is no face. Anybody can experience domestic violence. Male, female, black, white, Hispanic, anybody can experience domestic violence. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is. It doesn't matter where you work, if you don't work. It doesn't matter who you're in a relationship with or who you're dating or who your parents are. It doesn't matter about your gender, which I just stated that. Anybody can experience domestic violence. And we have to get to a place where we stop characterizing domestic violence with a certain group, because any person can experience it. You can go to work tomorrow and find out that maybe your boss or the person that's sitting next to you is experiencing domestic violence. So we want to make sure that we get to a place where we understand that domestic violence crosses all socioeconomic groups. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Anybody can experience domestic violence. The key is being able to identify when different types of abuse is actually going on in your relationship or in the relationship of your loved ones. And so you really want to take a look at that, and you really want to be aware. One of the most important things is being aware of the signs of domestic violence, being aware of the different types of abuse that's actually going on in relationships, and being able to address these things. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have my notes here. I have my PowerPoint ready because I'm a PowerPoint girl sometimes. So let's go ahead and just define what domestic violence is. And domestic violence is basically a pattern of behavior used by one person in the relationship to maintain or to gain power and control over the other person. So domestic violence, many times we hear the word domestic violence a lot, but what we don't hear is domestic abuse. We don't hear relationship abuse, and we don't hear intimate partner violence. All of those things mean the same thing. So when you're in a very toxic relationship, or in an abusive relationship, or the intimate partner violence is going on in a relationship, or when there's domestic abuse going on in the relationship, the goal is really to maintain power and control over another individual. And whether it's a female or whether it's a male, because we have men who are in domestic violence relationships as well, and we also have women. So we want to make sure that we don't just talk about the fact that women experience abuse, but we also want to talk about the fact that men experience abuse as well. And so let's talk a little bit about some statistics when it comes to domestic violence. And I'm a researcher, so I went through and looked up a lot of research when it comes to domestic violence. And in the United States alone, an average of 20 people experience intimate partner physical violence every minute. So that means while we're on Facebook Live right now, every minute somebody is experiencing some type of violence in their relationship. Research also shows that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner contact sexual violence as well, and also stalking. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men experience different types of intimate partner violence in their relationship. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. So what does that really mean? It's domestic violence or abuse is just not women experiencing it in their relationship, but men are as well. Research also says that 1 in 7 women and 1 in 18 men have been stalked. So think about, the statistics. Think about those cases that have not been actually recorded. So I wanted to bring that up so that we can stop putting the face of domestic violence just on a woman when men are experiencing abuse in their relationships as well. It's just so happened that we as women, most of the time we talk about it more. But with men, they very seldom talk about the abuse that they are actually experiencing in their relationship. So tonight is going to be twofold. I'm not going to be gender based. I'm just talking about domestic violence as a whole to raise awareness about what it is, what it looks like, and how it actually goes on in relationships. So a little bit more statistics, and because I live in the state of Texas, I pulled up some statistics for the state of Texas. And one of the things in the state of Texas that in 2013, there were 76,704 reported victims of abuse by current or former spouses. So we also want to take a look at the fact that domestic abuse or domestic violence or relationship abuse don't just happen in relationships where people are dating. They actually happen in marriages as well. But many a times, married people don't talk about it. These are the things that go on in marriages that people sweep under the rug. They don't talk about it in the marriage. But those that are dating, they usually talk about it and share. We find out about those things. But in a marriage, many a times, people don't talk about the fact that they're actually experiencing some type of abuse in their relationships. Research has also shown that in 2014, Texas domestic violence hotlines answered 185,373 calls. That's a lot. That is a whole lot. And 75% of Texas 16 to 24-year-olds have either experienced dating violence or know another young person who has experienced some type of dating violence. So those are just some statistics when it comes to domestic violence that I wanted to share with you as I continue talking about and raising awareness about domestic violence. So as I stated, when it comes to domestic violence, anyone can experience domestic violence, domestic abuse, relationship abuse. Anybody of any race, any age, any sexual orientation, any religion, any gender can be a victim of domestic violence or domestic abuse. It can happen to any person, married people, people who are living together, people who are dating, people who are engaged. It doesn't matter what your socioeconomic background is, and it definitely doesn't matter what your education level is. So when we talk about domestic violence, think about the person who sits next to you at work. Think about the person who sits next to you at church. We need to remove the idea that domestic violence has a particular face, because that is not so. So when it comes to domestic violence, remember, it's all about gaining power and control over the other person. Domestic violence includes behaviors that causes physical harm, that causes fear, that prevents a person from doing what it is that they want to do, or trying to force a person to behave in such a way that they don't want to or that they feel uncomfortable doing so. It's also about intimidation, using threats and using different types of violence to get the person to do certain things or to prevent a person from doing certain things. So what are some of the warning signs of domestic violence? And as I go through these warning signs, you want to take a look at your own relationship if you're in a relationship, or you just want to gain the knowledge so that you can be aware of the things that are actually going on in different types of relationships so that you can, number one, be knowledgeable. So when you talk to someone and you hear that someone is in a situation, you won't be so quick to say, oh, they should just leave. Because it's not that easy when a person is in a domestic violence relationship, an abusive relationship. There's a total difference between someone choosing to enter into a relationship with someone that they know already in a relationship with somebody else versus someone who is in a domestic violent relationship. So we want to make sure that we educate ourselves and we become more aware of what domestic violence is and not try to lump all relationships into one particular area. So some of the warning signs of domestic violence. Whenever a person is telling the other person that they can never do anything right, when there's extreme jealousy of friends or family members, or whenever the person wants to spend time away, whenever someone is discouraged from seeing their friends or they're isolated from seeing their friends, whenever a person is shamed or put down, when a person beat them down with words or treat them indifferent and really insults them and demeans them, whenever a person is controlling the money in the household, these are particular signs of domestic violence. Other signs of domestic violence: whenever a person is trying to control you or trying to see every little thing that you do or everywhere you go. They want to know what you do, what time you're going to get there, when you're coming back, controls who you talk to, controls who you hang out with, controls where you go to church, controls your entire life. Whenever they're trying to prevent you from making your own decisions, that's a warning sign of domestic violence. Whenever a person look at you in such a way to intimidate you or to scare you, that's a warning sign of domestic violence. Other warning signs of domestic violence: trying to keep you from working or attending school, trying to tell you where you should go to school or where you shouldn't go to school, or just basically wanted to keep you isolated from everybody else, keep you isolated from doing the things that you like to do, keeping you from going to work, keeping you from going to school, intimidates you with different types of weapons, guns and knives, pressures you into having sex when you don't want to, or pressure you to do things sexually that you're uncomfortable with. These are all some warning signs of domestic violence. So as I stated earlier, when it comes to domestic violence, we use several different types of terms. We use relationship abuse, intimate partner violence, domestic abuse. All of those are basically the same thing. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk to you about the different types of abuse, because there are certain types of abuse that show up in relationships, and many a times when these things show up in relationships, we either sweep them under the rug and we do not address them. And when we sweep things under the rug and don't address them, those things get bigger and bigger and bigger. And see, people wonder how they end up in a certain place in their relationship. And many a times it's because they did not see the warning signs. They did not see the things that were actually going on in the relationship, or they ignored all of the signs that something is not right. So let's talk about the different types of abuse. And I'm going to talk briefly about each one of these. physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse and coercion, spiritual abuse, financial abuse. And then there are two, as I was doing my research, digital abuse and reproductive coercion as well. And so I'm going to talk about each one of those. The first one I'm going to talk about is physical abuse. This is the one that we all see most of the time. You know, hitting, punching, slapping, black eyes, kicking, biting, choking, pulling a person's hair. You know, we see those. Sometimes the physical abuse we usually see, because we see all type of bruises on people. Maybe they may go to the hospital. They may go to a friend's house because of an arm is broken, because of a black eye, or, you know, something. So whenever there's pulling of the hair, punching, slapping, kicking, biting, you know, any type of physical things that we can see on a person that says that they are being physically abused. But physical abuse also includes forbidding or keeping a person from eating or sleeping. That's a form of physical abuse as well. When someone is being hurt with a weapon, sometimes we don't see that. It depends, but that is a form of physical abuse. Another form of physical abuse is keeping a person from seeking medical attention and keeping a person from calling the police when they are in danger or when they fear their lives. So those are examples of physical abuse. Other examples of physical abuse, and remember, these are just examples or different types of red flags that I'm giving you. Is by no means is this the entire list, but these are things that you want to look at. And I just pulled out some of those things that I felt that we needed to be more aware about. Other types of ways to know that that physical abuse is going on in a relationship: abandoning you in unfamiliar places, driving recklessly or dangerously when you're in the car with them. So these are different types of physical abuse. These are different things that you can look at to identify whether or not your relationship has physical abuse going on. So now let's move to emotional abuse. Now, emotional abuse, we really can't see emotional abuse, because emotional abuse is an internal thing. Emotional abuse occurs verbally when a person is saying something to a person, or they're doing different type of verbal or nonverbal types of behaviors to try to maintain control over the other person. Remember, abuse is about control. Abuse is about power. So being able to maintain and gain power and control over a person is what we call abuse. So now let's talk about emotional abuse. Emotional abuse includes insulting a person, criticizing a person, calling a person names, acting jealous or very possessive, isolating a person from family or friends, monitoring everywhere a person goes, monitoring who they call, monitoring who they spend their time with, demanding that they know where they are every minute. These are examples of emotional abuse in a relationship. Other examples of emotional abuse: whenever a person is trying to trap a person in their home and trying to prevent them from leaving. When a person is trying to punish the person by withholding affection, that's a form of emotional abuse in the relationship. Whenever the person is damaging property, especially when they're angry, throwing things, punching holes in walls, kicking doors in, things like that. These are all signs of emotional abuse in the relationship. Whenever a person, and this happens a lot in a relationship, that the perpetrator or the person that's doing the abusing actually blames the other person for the abuse. Blame them for their behaviors. So whenever a person blames the other person, that person blames you for their behavior or blames you for the abuse, that's a form of emotional abuse. And whenever a person is being accused of cheating, and when there's a lot of jealousy within the relationship, that's a form of emotional abuse. Whenever a person is blaming another person for his or her behavior, when they're the serial cheater, when they're constantly cheating over and over and over and over again, and then they blame the other person for their behaviors or blame the other person for the abuse, that is a sign that emotional abuse is actually occurring in the relationship. Other signs of emotional abuse: whenever a person is trying to control a person's appearance, trying to control what they wear, trying to control how they fix their hair, trying to control whether or not they wear makeup or not, or how they should, fix their hair, how they should do their makeup, or whether or not they should put makeup on, or whether or not they should put too much makeup on. Trying to basically control the appearance of the other person. And another real big sign of emotional abuse in a relationship: whenever a person tells you, or you hear somebody tell somebody, that they would never find anyone better, or that you are lucky to be with me, or you should be glad that I have chosen you, or you should be glad to be with a person like me. That is a sign of emotional abuse getting ready to happen. So if you know of anybody who's in a relationship, or you're in a relationship yourself, and the person you're in a relationship with flat out tells you that you'll never find anyone better, or they tell you that you should be lucky to be with them, you should run. You should reevaluate whether or not you want to be in a relationship, because when a person constantly tells you that, you will eventually begin to believe it. If a person tells you something over and over again, you will begin to internalize that and begin to believe it, and then you will begin to speak it out of your own mouth. So you want to be very careful as to what is being said in the relationship to try to maintain or gain power and control over you. Because statements like that are actually made to control your mind, to control your thinking. And one of the things that I can tell everybody, that when a person controls your mind and they controls your thinking, they can now control your behavior. So you want to be very, very cautious and really pay attention to the words that are actually being said in your relationship. And when things like this are being said to you, that is a door opening to maintain and gain power and control over you. One of the worst things that you can do is allow a person to control your mind and control your thinking, because again, that can also lead them into controlling your behavior. So you want to make sure that you are aware of the signs when it comes to emotional abuse as well. So now, let's get to sexual abuse, or what we call sexual coercion, when it comes to a relationship. Whenever a person is being forced to dress sexually, to dress in a very sexual or provocative way. Whenever a person is insulting you or being insulted in sexual ways, forcing or manipulating a person into having sex or performing sexual acts. Doing these types of things are actual forms of sexual abuse and coercion in a particular relationship. Other signs of sexual abuse: holding you down during sex, demanding sex when you're sick, when you're tired, or after you are hurting. These are all different signs of sexual abuse in a relationship. Other signs of sexual abuse in a relationship: involving other people in sexual activities that y'all have together against your will. Bringing other people into the bedroom against your will, without your permission, and just basically taking over. Whenever a person ignores your feelings regarding sex, if they force you to watch pornography, or if they purposefully, listen to this, if a person purposefully try to pass on a sexually transmitted disease to you, that is a form of sexual abuse when they are doing this on purpose. Whenever you're in a relationship with someone, you should talk to them, and they should share with you if they have any type of sexually transmitted disease, and not try to purposely pass this on to you. So these are different examples and signs of sexual abuse. And when it comes to sexual abuse in a relationship, this is really sexually aggressive behaviors. And so you want to be aware of how these things actually come up in a relationship and how they show up. So when it comes to sexual abuse and coercion in a relationship, it's done in such a way to make you feel like that you basically owe them. Basically, for example, if a person says, well, because we're in a relationship, we should have sex. Not true. Because you've had sex before, we might as well go ahead and have sex. Not true. Because they may feel as if because they've spent money on you or bought you several gifts that you should have sex with them. No. So when a person make you feel like you owe them in the relationship and trying to coerce you to have sex, because for them, they're trying to make you feel like, hey, you owe me, so we should be having sex. That's a form of sexual abuse in a relationship. And another sign when it comes to sexual abuse in a relationship, when a person says or they make different types of remarks to say that sex is a way to prove that you love them. And if I don't get sex from you, I'll get it from somewhere else. Oh my God, that is the biggest lie or the biggest way to maintain power and control over a person. If a person tells you, if I don't get sex, I'm going to get it from somewhere else, let them get it from somewhere else. Because the only thing they're doing is trying to gain control over you. If they gain control over your mind and gain control over your thinking, they control your behaviors. So if you don't love yourself enough, if you don't know who you are, then you'll give into that because, oh yeah, I don't want him or her to go get it from somewhere else, so I'm going to go ahead and give it to him. No, that is a sign of abuse, and it can continue in your relationship over and over and over and over again. Sex is not a way to prove that you love me when you're in a relationship. There's so many ways to prove your love. Yes, sex is a part of it, but when a person is trying to control you with sex, if they're trying to control your mind and control your thinking and control when they have sex with you, it is not right. It is out of order and it is inappropriate. So those are different signs of sexual abuse in a relationship. And then other signs is continuing to pressure you after you say no. No means no. If you tell a person no and they continue to pressure you over and over and over and over again, that's a sign of sexual abuse going on in your relationship. If they try to make you feel threatened or afraid of what might happen if you say no, that is a sign of sexual abuse in the relationship. And then if you hear certain statements is, I need it, I have to have it. No, they're trying to normalize their sexual expectations, and they need to deal with that on an individual basis and not bring you into their own sexual issues. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So whenever you're in a relationship with someone, you should never feel obligated. If a person tries to make you feel obligated to have sex with them by trying to force you into sexual acts against your will, that is a form of sexual abuse in a relationship. When you're in a relationship with someone, when you're married to someone, it doesn't mean that you owe them any type of intimacy of any kind. You don't owe them anything. Yes, it may come as a part of the relationship, but when a person tries to control you, when a person tries to manipulate you, when a person tries to say things to you to control your mind and control your thinking so they can control your behavior, those are forms of abuse in the relationship. So now let's talk about spiritual abuse. And I only have basically one thing to say about that. When you're in a relationship with someone and they try to use the word of God to maintain or gain control over you, using the word of God to get you to do certain things, manipulation, witchcraft, trying to use the word to say, this is what the Bible says and you need to do X, Y, and Z. The Bible says you need to do this, so you should be doing this. Instead instead of getting a revelation about the word of God and what the word of God says, and using and reading the scriptures before the scripture that they're using and after the scriptures that they're using, many times people pull certain scriptures or one scripture out of the Bible to gain or maintain power and control over a person. And when you don't know your Bible well enough, a person can control you and manipulate you with the word of God to get you to do what it is that they want you to do. So you want to be very careful about that as well. So now let's get into financial abuse. Financial abuse is whenever a person wants power or gains power and control in the area of finances. This is a form of abuse that happens in relationships as well. So financial abuse, these are some signs of financial abuse. When a person is closely watching how you spend every dime, and when they are demanding receipts for purchases, they want a receipt for everything you have spent. And they are keeping a close tab and watching every dime that you spend, from when you go to Exxon and buy a Snicker to when you got gas at the other Exxon. They need a detailed report of the money that you have actually spent. This is a sign of financial abuse in a relationship. Other signs of financial abuse in a relationship: whenever a person takes your paycheck, you heard what I said, your paycheck, and put it in their bank account and denies you access. That's a sign of financial abuse. Whenever a person prevents you from having access to bank accounts, that's a sign of financial abuse. Whenever a person is forbidding someone from working or limiting the amount of hours that they can work, that's a sign of financial abuse. Other signs of financial abuse: maxing out credit cards in your name without your permission is a sign of financial abuse in a relationship. Getting credit cards in your name without your permission is a sign of financial abuse. When a person is stealing money from someone, it's a sign of financial abuse. Living in the home and refusing to work and contribute to the household. Now, when I read this, I was like, wow, this is amazing. Because there are a lot of people who are in relationships and one person refused to work. Not that there's something going on and they can't work, but when a person refuses to work or contribute to the household, that's a form of financial abuse. Not that, hey, there's something going on with me, or there's something going on medically, physically, whatever the case may be, but when a person refuses to work or when they refuse to contribute to the household, that's a form of financial abuse. Whenever a person makes somebody give them their tax returns, as soon as you get your tax return, you have to give it to her or give it to him or whatever the case may be. That's a form of financial abuse. And then refusing to give you money to pay for daily living expenses, necessities, food, clothing, transportation, medical care, and medicine. When a person withholds money from you to prevent you from getting the things that you need to live day to day, to get your medicine, to get medical care, for transportation, that is a form of financial abuse in the relationship. So now let's get into digital abuse. When I was doing my research, I was like, wow, there's so many different areas of abuse, as we continue to grow and as the world continues to change. But then I read up on digital abuse. That is the use of technology, whether it's texting, social media, any type of social media, social networking group or whatever. Whenever a person uses that to harass, to bully, or to intimidate, or to maintain power and control over a person, when they're using those tools to do that, that's a form of digital abuse. Here's a big one. Digital abuse also includes telling you who you can and cannot be friends with on Facebook or other sites. Isn't that amazing? We have digital abuse now. We have people who are in relationships where the person that they're in a relationship with has told them you can't be friends with this person, or you can't be friends with that person, or you need to unfriend that particular person. Remember, abuse is about power and control. Power and control, power and control. I'm only talking about domestic violence tonight. I'm not talking about, in the relationships where, something has happened and you need to unfriend that person. But I'm talking about abuse tonight. So whenever someone tells the other person that who they can and cannot be friends with, that's a form of digital abuse. When a person uses Facebook, Twitter, or any type of social media to keep tabs, they know every time you post. They know every time you're on social media. They're basically keeping tabs of you on social media. They keeping tabs on when you update your status. They know everything about you. They're following everything about you, following you on every social media site, know when you posted a picture, know when you took the picture down. They're basically keeping tabs on you on social media. That's a form of digital abuse. Whenever a person says negative comments, messages, tweets, DMs, sliding into people's inboxes, saying negative things and posting negative pictures and just saying mean things, that is a form of digital abuse. Whenever a person steal or try to make you give them your password, that is a form of digital abuse. And when they feel like they have to constantly text you, when a person is constantly texting you and it's making you feel as if you cannot separate yourself from your cell phone because of the fear that you may be punished or something may happen if you don't respond back to their text, that is a form of digital abuse. Other forms of digital abuse. When the person is looking through a person's phone frequently, ongoing, looking at their text messages, looking at their pictures, looking at their outgoing calls, looking at their ingoing calls, questioning them about, who's calling, who's not calling, who was this texting you. When they're doing that frequently, ongoing, all the time, this is a form of digital abuse in a relationship. And then the big one is the one that's really amazing. Whenever a person uses any type of technology, whether it's spyware, GPS, there's an app. I cannot remember the name of this app. There's an app that you can put on a person's phone and track them everywhere they go. So when a person uses technology to monitor you, that is a sign of digital abuse. Yes. So if you got to keep tabs like that, or if the person got to keep tabs like that, that ain't cute. That ain't, oh, she loves me. Oh, he loves me. Oh, he really want to be with me. Every time you show up to an event, you got to FaceTime her or FaceTime him to let them know that this is where you are. No, that's abuse waiting to happen. They're just using these little subtle ways to make you feel special, but in reality, they're hiding the fact that they are controlling. And the ultimate goal at the end is to maintain power and control over you. And remember what I said, if a person can control your mind, if a person can control your thinking, they then can control your behavior. So that was digital abuse. So now let's get into reproductive coercion. And this is one of the ones that was really shocking to me because I had never heard of this until I started doing some research. But this is when a person strips the other person of the ability to control their own reproductive system. Who would have thought that people try to do that? So when it comes to signs of reproductive abuse or reproductive coercion, it's refusing to use a condom or any type of birth control during sexual activity. Other signs include breaking or removing the condom during intercourse, lying about different methods of birth control. If a person lies and says that they've had a vasectomy, men. If a woman lies and says that she's on birth control and she's really not. Whenever a guy refuses to pull out, as an agreed upon method of birth control. So if y'all have both agreed that, hey, this is what we're going to do. When it comes to sex, hey, I want you to pull out because this is our form of birth control, and that's not happening. That's a form of reproductive coercion in the relationship. And then when a person is being forced not to use any type of birth control, listen to the key words that I'm using: refusing, forcing, power, control, refusing again. Listen to those key words that I'm actually using. Other signs is removing birth control methods and not telling the person, removing IUDs, removing rings, removing contraceptive patches, stop taking birth control, sabotaging methods of birth control, poking holes in condoms, tampering with pills, throwing pills away, withholding finances to purchase birth control. Whenever a person is monitoring your menstrual cycle, that's a form of reproductive coercion or abuse in a relationship. Forcing pregnancy and not supporting your decision about when or if you want to have a child. Remember, listen to the key words: forcing, refusing, removing, sabotaging, withholding. Listen to the key words that are actually being used when it comes to these types of things happening in a relationship. Other signs of reproductive coercion or abuse in a relationship: forcing a person to get an abortion or preventing a person from getting one when they feel like that's what they want to do. Threatening a person or acting violently if they continue with the pregnancy. And then whenever a person is constantly wanting to keep a person pregnant over and over and over and over again, especially immediately after they have given birth to their child. So those are the different signs of different types of abuse. And so the different types of abuse that I've gone over is physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse and coercion, spiritual abuse, financial abuse, digital abuse, and reproductive coercion as well. These are the things that show up in relationships. So let's talk a little bit about why do people abuse other people? You know, I'm a therapist, and so I do a lot of work in the areas of relationships. So my thought process is totally different from any other type of person. And so when we talk about why people abuse other people, I always tell people that abuse is a learned behavior. You don't just wake up out of the womb and say, hey, I'm going to be an abuser. No, abuse is a learned behavior that a person has seen either in their household, among family members, or things that they've seen in the lives of maybe the families of some of their friends. So it's not something that, like I say, you come out of the womb and this is what you're going to be. You're going to be an abuser. No, it is a learned behavior. Think about this. Think about how you saw your mom, your dad, or your caregivers manage conflict when you were growing up. And then look at your own life and look at how you manage conflict now that you are an adult. Look at your own relationship. Do you scream? Do you cuss? Do you fuss? Do you throw things? Do you punch windows out? Do you punch walls? That didn't just show up. It's a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior. Something you saw growing up, something you saw amongst friends and their families, and then something you saw maybe just in your environment. An environment plays a real big role when it comes to abuse. People begin to react the same way that they saw their caregivers react, their mom, their dad, their friends, and their environment. They respond the same way. So if you were in an environment where it was a whole bunch of violence and now you're in a relationship, you're probably going to respond violently in that relationship. If you grew up in a household where there was domestic violence in the household, you're probably going to either be the abuser or end up in a relationship with someone who's actually an abuser, because we tend to attract that we have been comfortable with, or that we have been accustomed to in relationships. Not to say that can't be reversed, because it can be reversed. But you got to be able to be aware, know the signs, be able to look at your own self to see if you are responding a certain way. And if you're responding a certain way, you have to take a step back and ask yourself, where is this coming from? Why do I always scream, cuss, fuss, go off, throw things, slam things, punch walls, bust out windows, put sugar in tanks? Why do I always do those things when I get upset in my relationship? You have to do your own internal work. You have to be able to look at yourself and say, okay, where is this coming from? And then if you're in a relationship with someone who is an abuser, then you have to look at the fact, okay, this is not normal. You may have seen it growing up. You may have been in an environment like that where people stayed regardless. But we are living in a new day and time that you don't have to stay. There is help available, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. So let me get back to that. I don't know how I got off track on that, but anyway. Why do people abuse people? Again, to gain and maintain power and control. Abusive people feel as if they have the right to control another person or to restrict a person from doing something. They don't see anything wrong with it. For them, hey, I'm supposed to do this. I have a right to do this. And many a times people who abuse other people believe that their feelings and their needs should be top priority. They devalue their mates. They make their mates feel less valuable, very disrespectful, and less deserving. Because for them, in their mind, I should be priority. My needs and my feelings should be priority. And so they disregard the needs of their mate because they feel as if they should be put on the pedestal. Have you ever, and this is for the ladies and the men too, so have you ever been in a relationship with someone where, let's say you start crying because of something happened and the person is looking at you like this? And you're just crying and crying. They're just looking at you like this. And then they have the nerve to ask you, why are you crying? If you're in a relationship with somebody like that, you need to run. Because that person don't have the ability to be in touch with his or her own feelings. And they don't have the ability to be in touch and be empathetic towards you when you're feeling a certain way. But then they can immediately switch the conversation and make it about them, and then make you feel bad or less value because they want you to put them first. You have to be very careful of people who do that in relationships. So when it comes to abuse, I hear people, say that when a person is in an abusive relationship or a person is treating a person a certain way, then they should run or they should leave. They should get up out of there. You know what? It's not that easy. And I think I said that earlier. And there is a difference between being in an abusive relationship and being in a relationship where you choose to be in a relationship with someone that already got somebody, that's cheating, the infidelity thing. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But for tonight's purpose, I'm talking about domestic violence, domestic abuse, intimate partner violence. This is the issue. And many times people are so insensitive, and I don't think people mean to be insensitive on purpose. Many times it's because of the lack of knowledge. And people are not aware of what a domestic violent relationship look like or what it is. And they're not aware of domestic abuse or relationship abuse or intimate partner violence. And so they say things like, well, they should just leave or they should just walk away. And it's not always that easy when a person is in an abusive relationship. I'm going to say this again. It is not easy for a person to walk away from an intimate partner violent relationship, from a domestic violent relationship, from a abusive relationship. And a person is experiencing any type of abuse in a relationship, it is not easy for them to just walk away. So people need to stop saying they need to walk away or they need to leave. No. People need to keep their mouths off situations that they lack knowledge and that they lack understanding, and begin to become aware, raise awareness within themselves about the topics that they lack knowledge and understanding in. So when it comes to people who are in domestic violent relationship or abusive relationship, they do everything they can to try to cope with the abuse. And people who've never been in an abusive relationship, they don't understand that. And many times they themselves have been abusive, so they really can't understand, because an abuser don't understand this. And those that are in a relationship like this, they get it. They go to extremes trying to cope with the abuse. And many times I'm going to say all the time, they want the abuse to stop, but they still want to be in the relationship. And people who've never been there, they don't understand that. So they say things that shows their lack of knowledge and their lack of understanding. Y'all know I want to say another word, but I can't. But they say things that shows their lack of knowledge and their lack of understanding. So when a person, male or female, is in an abusive relationship, they love the person. They want the abuse to end. They want the fighting to end. They want it all to end, but they don't want the relationship to end. They really don't. Many times they feel isolated. Many times they feel depressed and helpless. And when they are around family members or friends who say things like, oh, that person should just leave, or that person should do this, they're not going to open up to you, because they already know how you feel. They already know what your thought process is, so they're not going to open up. So that's why they feel helpless. And many times they are unaware of the services that are actually available to help them. So then they begin to feel depressed. They begin to feel very helpless. And sometimes they have suicidal thoughts. They feel embarrassed. They feel judged and stigmatized. Most of the time they deny or minimize the abuse. They make excuses. And then when they try to talk to family members or friends, they say things like, why don't you just leave? And I always tell people, if you have a friend or family member who's struggling in this area, don't say that to them, because then you've already isolated them. If you don't, the best thing you can do is empathize with them. Listen to them. Find out whether or not they're ready to seek help. And then begin to give them the resources that are needed. And if you don't know, then you reach out to someone else with their permission to see if they want to seek help for what they're going through. Most of the time, people go back 7 times before they decide that they're going to leave an abusive situation, male or female. People who experience domestic violence, they become emotionally withdrawn. They distance themselves from family and friends. And one of the number one reasons why people distance themselves from family and friends, because they feel as if they're going to be judged. They feel as if they're going to be stigmatized, and they are embarrassed. And so they emotionally withdraw. They distance themselves. And many times they still love the person that they are in the abusive relationship with. And people on the outside don't understand that. So then they say things that show their lack of understanding and their lack of knowledge. And most of the time, they just should be quiet and just listen. Don't speak about something you have no understanding about. Don't speak about something you have no knowledge about. Don't try to tell a person to just leave when you do not get it. And that's what we have to stop doing to people who are in violent relationships. People who are in domestic violent relationship or abusive relationship, they feel financially dependent on their abuser. Again, they feel ashamed. They deal with anxiety. And again, they can have suicidal thoughts. Most of the time, they're very hopeful that the person that they're in a relationship will stop abusing them or that the person will change. And sometimes they have religious, cultural, or other beliefs that actually reinforce them staying in a relationship. And if you don't have a conversation with them, you don't know that. So then you tend to say things that show your lack of knowledge and your lack of understanding. People who are in abusive relationships, many times they have no support from friends or family. They fear that their community will backlash them or hinder them from leaving or getting the support that they need if they get out of this social group because she's abusive or because he's abusive. So now I'm not going to be a part of this particular type of community. And if I walk away, there's going to be backlash and people are going to treat me indifferent and I'm not going to be able to get all the support that I need. Many times people who are in abusive relationships feel like they have nowhere to go and they don't have the ability to get away. They feel as if they have this real big fear that they're not going to be able to support themselves because they've been beat down so much that they don't realize that they have the power in them to raise themselves, but they need help and guidance to get in them back the power that was taken away from them while being in that relationship. So they fear that they would not be able to care for themselves or support themselves. Then for women and for men who have children, they fear losing custody of their children to the person or to their abuser. And so we have to be able to create a safe environment for people who've been in domestic violence situations or those who are in violent relationships now. We don't need to talk about them. We don't need to call people and tell everybody. We need to pray for them and help them and see what it is that they need to get the help that is available to them should they decide that they are ready to walk away from the relationship. And again, the reason why I titled this that choosing to stay is not always a choice because sometimes people are just not ready. Sometimes people are not in a position that they're ready. Sometimes there are other factors that have to be considered before a person walk away from the relationship. And we got to raise our awareness about domestic violence and the impact of domestic violence and listen to people. Listen to people. Listen to people. And that is very, very, very important. Don't take a person's story and use it against them because of your lack of knowledge and your lack of understanding. Because it does more damage than it does helping them. So now let's talk about why do people stay? Oh my God, I read a great article and you can check this article out. It's called The 50 Obstacles to Leaving. Why Abuse Victims Stay. And it's by Sarah Buell. If Sarah listens to this, I hope I didn't mess up your last name. But this article is absolutely phenomenal. And I encourage everybody to look up this article, 50 Obstacles to Leaving, Why Abuse Victims Stay. Great article. So one of the number one reasons why people who are in abusive relationships stay is because of fear. They are afraid of what would happen if they decide to leave the relationship. None of us know anybody's story. Anybody who's in an abusive relationship, we don't know their story. And another reason why people stay, they believe abuse is normal. People can actually become accustomed to abuse. If they grew up in an environment where abuse was common and then they get into an unhealthy relationship, most of the time they feel as if it's normal, so they stay. Another reason why people stay is they fear being outed out. They fear that, hey, I stay because you know what? My partner, the person I'm with, may threaten me or have threatened me and to reveal a secret that I have shared with this person. So to keep that secret from being shared, they stay in that relationship. Another reason why people stay in abusive relationships is because of embarrassment and shame. It's difficult. That's one of the most difficult things in the world. It's for someone to admit that they have been abused or they are being abused in their relationship. That's the hardest thing for a person to do. The hardest thing. It's a hard thing for females. It's a hard thing for male. Men and women both. It's hard to admit that I'm being abused. It's hard to admit that, hey, something is going on in my relationship or my partner is being abused, especially when the person holds a very high position or held in very high regard in families. It's hard. So because of embarrassment and shame, and they don't want friends or family to judge them, many times people stay in those relationships. Other reasons why people stay in relationships, because they love the person. You know, and people will always say, well, how can you love somebody who beats you? How could you love somebody that treats you like that? Fall in love. And you'll see. And we got to stop saying those things to people because you don't know their story. And I keep saying this. Stop speaking about what you lack knowledge and understanding about. Because you don't know anybody's story. And then other reasons why a person may leave because of religious reasons. Because of language barriers and because of immigration status. People may stay in abusive relationships. And when it comes to religion, their religion or their culture may influence them to stay rather than ending the relationship. And that happens in a lot of religions and a lot of cultures, that people are basically influenced to stay regardless of what's going on in their relationship, because of the fear that it would bring shame upon the family if they walk away. And again, another reason why people stay in an abusive relationship is because language barriers and because of their immigration status, especially if they're undocumented and so forth. They fear of being, sent back or, having all types of issues and challenges and so forth. So many times people stay in abusive relationships because of that. Other reasons why: low self-esteem. When a person is constantly being put down, treated bad, talked about, hurt, their self-esteem gets lower and lower and lower. You'd be surprised of how many people walking around looking good, smelling good, and their self-esteem is down here. Because they're in relationships where they're being abused, where they're being verbally abused, where they're being emotionally abused, they're being physically abused, and they are just broken down. So people stay in abusive relationships because of self-esteem. Because one of the things they don't realize is that it's not their fault that the other person has issues that he or she cannot keep their hands off of them. And then another reason why people stay in abusive relationships is because of the lack of money and the lack of resources. And then another reason people stay in abusive relationship because of a disability. When their dependency is heavily influences their decisions to stay in an abusive relationship because of their disability, many times people stay because they have to have that help from that abusive partner, not knowing that there's other help available. So they feel as if their well-being is connected to that relationship, so they end up staying. So I want to say in my closing, there is help. Help is available. Here in Texas, we have the Genesis Women's Shelter and Support, and that number is 214-946-HELP. or 214-946-4357. We have Hope's Door, and that number is 972-276-0057. We have the Safe Haven of Tarrant County. That number is 1-877-701-7233. And then we also have resources that you can go online to all of these websites to get resources. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, that website I absolutely love. And then we have the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And their number is 1-800-799-7233. It's similar to the Tarrant County one, but it's different. So the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. And if you review their relationship, if you review their website, you'll see they have safety plans on there. They have ways to leave. They have legal information on there. They have all types of things that are available on their website to really help a person who is in a domestic violent relationship. And also they have a lot of information for people who want to educate themselves about domestic violence. And I encourage everybody, educate yourself about domestic violence, about abuse, about unhealthy relationships. And then one of my favorites, if you're looking for a counselor, you need a therapist, you need a counselor, look up Therapy for Black Girls. There's a list of therapists all over the world who are actually listed on this particular website, Therapy for Black Girls. I'm listed on there myself. There are a whole lot of other therapists that are listed on there, but help is available. You don't have to go through this alone, and then you don't have to, for those that are not educated and those that are not aware of abuse and domestic violence, you don't have to no longer not be aware. You can raise your level of understanding and awareness about domestic violence by going to the National Domestic Violence Hotline website, by going to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website, by going to the Safe Haven of Tarrant County website, by going to the Genesis Women's Shelter and Support website, and then by going to Hope Doors website, and then reaching out to different therapists that are maybe in your area and having them to come speak about domestic violence to raise awareness in the community. So this has been Dr. LaWanda in Evans. Hopefully something I have said has been helpful to you all. You can use it. You can take it back, share with other people. But I really wanted to raise awareness before we end October, because October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And I really want to take this time to talk about domestic violence and really educate us on what abuse is and how it actually plays out in relationships. And somebody asked me about, what about educational deficits? Yes, I would definitely agree that when a person has educational deficits, that can actually keep them in an abusive relationship, especially if they're in a relationship with someone who has more education than they do. Of course, that can keep a person bound in a relationship. Thank you so much. It has been awesome. I've had a wonderful time tonight. I think I was on longer tonight than I've ever been, but thank you all so much for joining in. If you know of anyone who needs this information, please feel free to share it with them. Please feel free to invite them to watch over and over again, because domestic violence is real, and it doesn't matter who you are, where you go to work, how you dress, what your race is, if you're male, if you're female. Domestic violence is real, and it hits almost every other household. Many times, like I said earlier, we sweep things under the rug instead of dealing with them. We ignore the red flags instead of dealing with them. And then those red flags get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So I want to encourage everybody, don't ignore the red flags. Educate yourself. And for those of you who are not aware, raise your awareness and stop speaking about things that you have a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding about. Raise your own awareness about this and be very mindful of the things that you say to people who may be in an abusive relationship. Thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful night. And until next time, I will see you all in 2 weeks. For my next topic. Not sure what I'm going to talk about the next time, but I will see you in 2 weeks for the truth about your relationship. And I will be posting what the next topic would be later on this week or sometime next week. But anyway, have a great night and thank you again. Bye-bye.